You're very welcome back. Now, on the 15th of August 1969, 9-year-old Patrick Rooney became the first child of 186 children killed as a result of the Troubles in the North. 50 years on, their young lives are honoured in a new book, Children of the Troubles, the untold story of the children killed in the Northern Irish conflict.
And the book's author is Northern correspondent with the Irish Times, Freya McClements, and broadcaster Joe Duffy. Join us. Good morning to you both. Thank you for coming in.
Good morning.
Thank you.
It's an incredible book. It's a shame that it ever had to be written, but it did. And it's an important book because that's a very high number of kids who lost their lives as a result of the Troubles. It must have been, I mean, reading some of the stories that are in here, it's heartbreaking. There's no good stories in there. Yeah. It must have been very difficult to research and put together, I'd imagine.
It was, and I mean, inevitably, in a sense, you know, you're asking families who lost children in the Troubles to trust you with, you know, with their memories and to open up to you about what's effectively the worst thing that's ever happened to them in their lives. The worst thing that could happen to anybody, you know, is the loss of a child. And I think one of the things that Joe and I found when we were writing the book, we were amazed actually that there were some children whose deaths just hadn't been publicly acknowledged or publicly recorded, and that was all the more heartbreaking for those families, because obviously they were always remembered at home and in the local communities, but there wasn't that kind of wider recognition. And I know that there were times, I mean, we've both talked about times when you would find yourself just you'd be crying with families, you know, sitting in their front rooms looking at the photos. You know, I remember one afternoon after speaking to families in Belfast and driving home to Derry, and the tears were just coming down my face, and I just couldn't stop crying. But at the same time, I think there's a sense, certainly with both of us and with all the families who've been involved in the book, that it's really, really important that their stories are told, that their names are acknowledged. You know, you think of one mother, Maureen Rafferty, who's the mother of Philip Rafferty, a 14-year-old boy who was just abducted from the street in Belfast, purely sectarian, abducted by loyalists simply because he was a Catholic, and taken and tortured and shot. And he was, you know, he was a clever, gentle boy. He had asthma. You know, he was a musician. He wanted to become an architect and build his mother a house. And his mother said so powerfully, she said, you know, nobody knows my Philip's name. You know, they took a boy off the street, put his hood over his head and murdered him. I think the world should know these things. And those words were almost, in effect, a bit of a guiding light for us, because, you know, the world now knows Philip Rafferty's name. I'm ashamed to say, I mean, I'm a journalist. I'm from the North. You know, I didn't know his name, and now the world does, and the world knows the names of those.
And Joe, that acknowledgement is so important. I think the last time we spoke to you was around the children of the Rising. And you were making the same point then as you are now, the acknowledgement. I mean, our children are our world, aren't they? And yet these children went unaccounted for almost, and unmentioned.
Unmentioned. Of course, they're mentioned every single day, and their families, and every single day in Northern Ireland. We now believe from our research that we found around 6% more than had originally. I hate putting the percentages because you're talking real life. So that means the death toll, people talk about the death toll in Northern Ireland, is around, there's no official figure, which is unbelievable, which is around 3,600, 3,700. We now believe it's closer to 4,000, because the Lost Lives, which is a magisterial book, it's a tome, it's like a Bible, but it has a list of, from the newspapers basically, because it was 1998, no internet. And when we start researching, obviously we started with Lost Lives, but we found a significant number of extra children who never made it into the newspaper, so to speak. They might have been shot, God forbid, on a Monday and died 3 weeks later. The shooting would be in the newspapers, but their death wasn't. The death might not have been reported.
One of the many staggering things that jumped out at me was, again, a statistic, but that such a percentage of these kids, because I would have presumed that you're talking about kids who were abducted or killed in the crossfire or at a bomb, but a percentage of kids that were killed in their own houses.
Well, there's 10% of the children in that book, and again, you hate to put a percentage on, were killed in their own homes. There were 3 or 4 were killed in their own gardens. I mean, there's one little boy, Jim Daugherty, a 6-year-old in Belfast, he was out playing and he was picking roses for his mother from the garden, and he was shot, and his mother actually had deliberately had the children play in the garden. She wouldn't let them out on the street because she thought it was too dangerous, you know. And then you go into the number of children who were killed, you know, on their own street or in the streets around them.
And then even the McCool sisters in Derry, there was was at the beginning of the Troubles. Their father was, as I say, an old IRA man, but he was downstairs with a few of his comrades, as they called them, and they were making a bomb, basically, and the house blew up and the two sisters were killed. And the tragedy was, for many years afterwards, the three men that were killed were memorialised every year. There'd be a march and a plaque.
Yes.
The two children were never mentioned. No. They were never mentioned until quite recently.
Yeah.
They were never mentioned. These two young, who were in bed, beautiful, gorgeous girls, and that's what we're trying to do. We're just trying to do in a respectful, dignified, and accurate way. That's accuracy. We're living in dread. Yeah. And we've been working on this.
Because gathering those details, I mean, this book is quite unique in that respect, isn't it?
I contacted the Horton family. People forget them. There was a number of families completely wiped off the face of the earth. Yeah. The O'Briens in the Dublin bombing. John and Anna and Anne-Marie and Jacqueline, gone, the whole family gone. And in the Dublin bombing, in the morgue the day afterwards, people are saying, how come nobody has come to identify, insofar as you could, by the way, identify these children? Where are their parents? Exactly. They didn't realise their parents were lying in the same morgue with them. The whole family had been obliterated. But the Horton family, who were that's about four... The Hortons were February 74. Dublin bombing was May 74. The Horton family wiped out two children, Robert and Lee, Clifford and the parents. They were wiped out on a bus that was blown up because the IRA put a bomb on the bus, no warning bomb on the bus, because there was British soldiers on the bus. And Clifford was on the bus.
The M62 in
the first thing, when we contacted that family, the first thing Linda Horton, the first thing Linda Horton's sister said to me, will you please correct the spelling of my sister's name? She's been spelled wrong in every newspaper report. You know, just the spelling of her surname. And then they spoke about. So you're trying to be accurate, you're trying to get a proper record. And Annie, you mentioned the 1916 book. One of the things I realised, I wrote that 100 years, so to speak, after. It was too late, because children don't have children. Yeah. If we start looking at children, don't have a direct line. Yeah. They don't have great-grandchildren who will carry the flame. Of course they have, and it's still in Northern Ireland and beyond. There was children killed in the Republic, children killed in Belturbet, children killed in Mullaghmore, children killed in Dublin, children killed in Warrington, children killed in Rugby, children killed in London, children killed in West Germany because of as a result of the Northern Ireland conflict. And we're just trying to respect them and remember them and collate the names. And as I say, we still, even now, we you know, on one hand we say dread because we wrote the book, but also hope that if anyone else contacts us and says, listen, why isn't my child in there?
Yes.
Like we've an email
and you'd be totally open to people doing that.
Absolutely. I mean,
especially now, because it's only 50, the Rising book was 100 years. As I say, it was almost too late. And the tragedy of the Rising book is those 40 children, bar one, had never even been mentioned in any of the 500, near 1,000 books written about 1916. Never mentioned. And I'm even reading, I read this book during the week, produced by Cork County Council in commemoration of 1916, and it's called Cherish, Cherish, Cherish. Okay, it's a wonderful book, great writers in it. And Cherish, Cherish, Cherish is from the proclamation. It's about 1916. From the proclamation, cherish the children of the nation. Yeah. Does any of the essayists once mention the children that died in the Troubles? No. Gone, forgotten. You know what I mean? Yeah. But what we're trying to do now is, we're coming at 50 years, as you said in your opening, since the first child. You're trying to get the parents now, who are, a lot of them are still, and will be, wounded.
And Freya, you have a story, just before we run out of time, if you don't mind me saying this, a story in the book that you don't necessarily reference yourself in, but it's your personal experience.
And this is, I mean, the reason that the story is sort of included in the book is part of what we were trying to convey also was the reality of childhood during the Troubles, and the extent to which a lot of this became normal. And I didn't grow up in Belfast or Derry, where it would have been particularly bad. I grew up in a little village in County Derry, which would have been more peaceful, but you still remember things like the bombs and the checkpoints and all of that kind of thing. And there's a story in there, and I don't name myself in the book because, again, it's not about me, it's about the children, but it's about being in a cafe cafe at the top of a department store one Saturday with my mum and my granny and my little brother, and there was a bomb scare and everybody was evacuated, and I had this wobbly tooth. So I think I was about probably 7 or 8, and as we're being all evacuated down the street, my tooth fell out, and I remember stopping dead in the street and saying to my mum, "Oh, my tooth fell out.
I have to go back."
And yeah, and she sort of grabbed me by there and says, come on, you know. And I remember being just so annoyed that this really big thing had happened to me, that my tooth had fallen out.
That's the biggest thing in a 7-year-old's
world.
world.
And she wasn't paying attention. And to me, that just sums up something about, you know, the bomb scare wasn't the fact that we'd sort of had to leave our lunch and all been evacuated down these stairs and to the end of the street to sort of stand there. I mean, I can't actually remember if there was a bomb that day or not, but
there's
it
such
says
an
something about the
eeriness
normality
about that story, isn't there?
Listen, thank you for coming in.
Thank
we
you.
appreciate
Thanks for
your time,
having us.
and
Well
thank
done.
you for the book. It's a
Yeah,
beautiful
it's
piece of work.
fantastic.
Thank you.
Children of the Troubles.